All right, we are back with more NBA coverage prior to the NBA draft tonight. And because we have trades, as well as the big one. It was detailed all throughout the day yesterday that one could potentially be coming in prior to the big event that will see the next generation of superstar players and even some role guys getting looks from these NBA teams. And of course, up to this point, that deal came down to two rosters in particular serving completely different purposes. In the overnight, it would reach its conclusion after multiple years and layers. As per Shams Charania in the overnight, the Bucks officially sent Giannis Antetokounmpo and Bobby Portis Jr. as well, former Sixth Man of the Year award winner, to the Heat in exchange for Tyler Herro, Kel'el Ware, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Kasparas Jakucionis, the 13th overall pick in this draft, 2031 and 2033 unprotected first-round picks, a 2033 second-round pick, as well as a 2030 pick swap. And with that, the Heat get the superstar that they have been looking for, and at least the past 4 or so years. It's been a little while, and that carries a lot of weight in South Beach, obviously. Meanwhile, the Bucks have taken themselves a direction that is less favored in ways. Maybe they could still linger in the realm of playoff contention, but they aren't going to be in a world where they have to demand and supply as much as they once did to the orders of an outright franchise player. You see, we got here in the first place for a few reasons. For the Bucks, it ended up being a long-lasting power struggle. Giannis Antetokounmpo is obviously a player whose reputation precedes him. There is no question that with it being all said and done now, despite me thinking that he would honestly be a lifer in Milwaukee, he was going to retire with that team and stay there for a while longer. It's the business side of the NBA, and that did not come to be. But at the very least, he cemented his legacy with that team and will undoubtedly go down as one of their best players of all time, leaving this franchise after currently leading them in all of points, rebounds, and assists all time. Of course, he got them the championship in 2021 with that dynamic series and that historically great closeout game with the 50 points and 10 rebounds. Just a true assassin on the court in every way, especially during that playoff campaign. And so his leverage at that point was an all-time high. They gave him a long-term contract extension, which made sense for one of the best players in the NBA, and the way some of the conversations were, the best player in the world at the time. As the years have gone on, though, the Bucks, mainly due to a lot of these playoff losses suffered against either of the Heat or the Celtics, ironically enough, they have continued to underperform and fall far below their intended expectations. And in seeing all of this, the question rose in Giannis's mind somewhere along the lines that, hey, maybe we were not doing enough to win. Or maybe this team is not doing enough to get the talent around me that I need in order to lead this team back to the promised land and back to an NBA Finals appearance. You know, there's something to be said about it. That with him consistently being one of the best players in the league, the championship window has just completely passed this team by. They were never able to make it back there, and for a number of different reasons. He would have the production, but something would always go wrong. It was Chris Middleton getting hurt, leaving them without a clutch time performer to work alongside Giannis. It was Giannis himself getting hurt on several different occasions over the past few years, namely this 2025 season, where he suffered a number of calf injuries, hamstring injuries, lower leg injuries alone, and eventually was taken out for the rest of the season. After the Bucks had already gotten off to a slow start, they did not come nearly close to playoff contention. And so when you're constantly hitting that wall as a superstar, you want, at some point, to get over the hump. It's tough because Giannis kept on making these pleas over the years, and that, hey, as he himself said, if I feel as if they are not doing enough to compete for a championship, I'm going to leave. He essentially said that. And the Bucks, to their credit, they tried to heed this warning. They tried to go for solutions. One of the first was them going out and moving on from Chris Middleton, bringing in Damian Lillard, of course, after they sent away Drew Holiday to Boston at that time via other resources being sent to the Trailblazers in that multi-team deal. So they do that, and Damian Lillard as well, in regards to injuries. Obviously, him tearing his Achilles was just an incredibly unfortunate situation. The fit itself was already questioned between those two, and despite them combining to put up great numbers, the effect that it had on the rest of the team was not beneficial. They did not have this excellent style of play that could dominate the league as they once thought. And seeing all of that combined with the age and the injury question surrounding Damian Lillard, they waived and stretched him over the next 5 years, with that possibly factoring into this deal at the end of the day as well, seeing as they have to give out at least $24 or so million to Damian Lillard across the terms of this duration of the deal. And then you go out and get Miles Turner after the waiving stretch. And Miles Turner as well did not perform up to expectation either. So you get just a lot of these short-term solutions trying to put a band-aid on the overall problem for the Bucks. Meanwhile, it's a situation that they put themselves in. Again, you're going to invest all that money in Giannis because he's that important of a franchise player for you to have. But it left them with very little asset room to go out and pick up other valuable pieces that they would have likely needed to build more around Giannis. A team led by him is going to need its fair blend of shooters and ball handlers who can take pressure off when the time calls for it, as well as competent defenders. And going for some of the trades that they had over the past few years, for fucking Kyle Kuzma, for Cole Anthony, for Nigel Hayes-Davis at this most recent trade deadline, the front office themselves also conceded that there wasn't much that they could do. Now, again, I grilled them. I grilled them crazy for making that shitty-ass move. But they may have been left with no choice. And the Heat as well, looking at their side of things in regards to how we got to this trade. Again, Jimmy Butler III had obviously done wonders for this team, literally catapulting them to multiple NBA Finals appearances, including a series against the Bucks in 2023 that pretty much will never be forgotten. I mean, you want to talk about somebody putting on a display as a one-man army? The kinds of shots, a fucking alley-oop tip-in with just a second and a few ticks left on the clock to bring that game to overtime and then win? Clutch shot after clutch shot from Jimmy Butler III, on top of having guys like Max Strus and Gabe Vincent alongside him from time to time, making those timely shots to get the Heat all the way to the NBA Finals against the Nuggets that year. And then, of course, they'd already done it in the bubble. It seemed like things were at an all-time high for that roster until the abrasiveness of Pat Riley came in. And that's been something that has factored in them missing out on several superstar caliber players over the last few years. But it especially affected the relationship with Jimmy Butler III on the team. And the back and forth that those two had blew up essentially in that later stretch of that particular season in 2025. Across the entire offseason, and then you have them bickering back and forth with each other to the point where it was told that Jimmy Butler III had officially requested a trade, and that he had lost his joy for the game, specifically being in Miami, knowing that he wasn't going to regain his joy there. Yeah, those comments and all the like. It put the younger players on the Heat, the Tyler Herros, the Bam Adebayos, in such a weird spot after being led by Butler III for all that time. Now, understanding that this man didn't even want to be there anymore, somebody was going to have to pick up the slack somewhere eventually. Like the entire process leading up to that trade deadline deal that sent Jimmy Butler III over to the Warriors for a 1-to-1 deal that brought over Andrew Wiggins from the squad as well, it was chaotic. He essentially sat out up to that point, did not appear for a great number of games in a row for that Heat team. It was ugly. And as a result, the Heat, since that point, honestly, they've struggled to really regain their footing. They went under 500 at a 37-45 record in 24-25 and had a decent second half of the year despite having Jimmy Butler III leave in that fashion. But it was only good enough to contend for the play-in. Same thing for this 2025-26 season. The Heat were 43-39, good enough for the play-in, but not necessarily blowing the hinges off the door as an elite team to be taken seriously in the Eastern Conference. And they still only qualified for the play-in, losing to the Hornets, maybe in controversial fashion, as I had accounted for in my recap. But considering the history that this team has, the kinds of talent that they acquire, the championships that they've had in this century, this side of the century at least, like they want to be truly competing and relevant on a much larger level than they have been over the past couple seasons. And so things reached a head pretty much in the overnight, transitioning into this day as I'm recording this video, literally on the day of the draft. These conversations were had at the trade deadline with both of these teams. And we were questioning at the time. The Bucks had been essentially talking shop with several teams around that time, and it seemed like for a few teams they had traction on a deal. However, the Bucks made the decision to not shop away Giannis at that time, figuring that they could have much greater conversations and pick up a lot more assets once the offseason rolled around, which ended up happening here. You know, the Celtics were a part of this conversation up to that time, and I'll get into them later, because obviously they missed out. There was a lot surrounding it when it came to Jaylen Brown potentially being involved in that deal after all of the shit that had been going on between that team and him over the past few months since they'd been eliminated from the playoffs. This is about the Heat now, despite being mid, essentially, for all this time, finding their way into the conversation and getting themselves an elite player. Now, I'd read off the details of the trade. Immediately, what may jump out at some people is that it does look, on paper, lopsided. It looks very lopsided. We'll be honest about that. You know, you have two players being sent over on Milwaukee's end, and you give up an absolute haul of 4 picks, 4 players, and another pick swap. Not to mention that this trade can legitimately be expanded because they allowed it to be open. The moratorium goes all the way to July 6th. So even though the trade was verbally agreed to, it's not made official. Any number of teams could add in potential bids and tie in other players to the deal here. And I am of a strong belief that that is going to happen. It looks that way for the Heat. But as I'd say for both teams and just established right now, it serves the purposes that they are both yearning for right now. The Heat want to go all in for a championship and believe that they were not, even though they lost some key talent beforehand, they clearly were not doing a great job of just sitting in the middle with absolutely no direction. They figured that the players they still had up to this point were way too good to have their time wasted in a potential rebuild. And this is a massive sign of faith in them, showcasing that, hey, now we have an unquestioned number one on our floor in terms of a scoring option, who also happens to be one of the best two-way players in the league for a front court that is already pretty rigid defensively. Adding that to our core, as long as we can get some other things figured out, is going to be key for us to at least get ourselves in the conversation. And it's going to take some time. It is not a perfect deal in nature for the Heat. They lost a lot of their youth and depth in this one deal. Although Bobby Portis Jr., for his own credit, a man who again won Sixth Man of the Year and was pretty decent when he played last year, he'll come right in. He'll be able to fill out that role relatively well. Or at least a Sixth Man of the Year candidate, not winner. But nonetheless, since he'd been in Milwaukee filling out that role mostly, aside from the brief suspension he had in 24-25 due to drugs, he had averaged 13.6 points per game along with 8 rebounds per game on 49.3% shooting and 40.9% shooting from deep in Milwaukee, primarily as a sixth man. Like, literally. He played 406 games, started in just 108 of them. So you're getting that off the bench, and that's going to primarily be the focal point of that second unit in a way, I imagine. I don't think that would change much. So that is a surefire thing from Bobby Portis Jr., knowing that he will be 32 on February 10th as well. Like, you're not going to have that miss a beat at all. It's just about everything else right now. And I mean quite literally. You know, people are kind of questioning how Giannis and Adebayo can coexist, especially as offensive players. Honestly, that's not too much of a focus for me. Because as was being said, and as I kind of alluded to, it's like, yes, you look at Bam Adebayo, you automatically see 83-point game, and you just assume that he is going to demand the ball at will. That's not really Bam Adebayo's game. which is why some people are saying that he is just one of the weirder superstar caliber players out there. Because as much as you look at that game as an example of what he can do when he does command the offense a lot more, generally that's not been his focus. Like we've said, he's taken those strides to become a better three-point shooter over the years and especially get his handle right. Alex saw found that out the hard way. Those improvements are understandable to recognize. Yet still, it's not the core identity of Bam Adebayo's game. If he needs to do it, he can. And if he can't, well, you have Giannis, who can pick up the slack as a taller, potentially stronger forward, who could slide down and play center in this role if they don't want Bam Adebayo to do it. I think that both of them are players who will need their touches in the post, who will need their touches in the pick and roll game, although Giannis, in ways, can do it as a primary ball handler. And you've seen that in games where he'd have like 20, 15, and 7, 30, 12, and 10, occasionally with the triple doubles and everything. There was literally a matchup against the fucking Hornets where I think this man had 20 assists, unless I'm just completely out of my mind. So, coming from a man who quite literally started out his career under the Jason Kidd tutelage, playing fucking point guard and reps at that position for games on end for an entire season, I think that if you ask Giannis to play that point forward role, he may be more willing to do it in ways that Bam Adebayo cannot serve right now. Both of them are probably lob threats as well, although you trust Giannis with that task a little more. It's going to be a bit of growing pain there. I'd imagine that. Like, they're going to have to find their footing because they want to do a lot of similar things. And Adebayo as well, this is going to be a test because Giannis is still limited in his ability to shoot. So, with making those jumps over the years in the offseason, and he's probably, as we speak, going to the lab, getting in the work for that right now, that is going to have to pay off in a way for Bam Adebayo if this thing is to reach its peak. Because a front court consisting of those two, with at least one of them being able to shoot, can only help a spacing aspect for the Heat that is probably a bit weaker right now. Considering the numbers that Bam Adebayo had, he shot 31.8% from 3 last year. And that actually turned up to be a bit of a decrease, although he attempted by far his highest overall 3-point attempts per game with 5.5 and made 1.7 of them. Also a career high. So the effort is there, the ability to at least work towards doing it. The intent is there for Bam Adebayo. The execution is going to be everything in a system like this. That just adds another layer of versatility to it. And you can still have Giannis again as the roll man or as the ball handler in a pick and roll go to fucking town against these defenses. That's another thing to think about as well. They are going to have to figure out, hey, if we're not going to run as many plays with screens. Think about how they changed up their offense last year. How they raved, Bam Adebayo specifically, about an offense that wasn't as predicated on screens and just really contingent on them getting out and running the floor faster than everybody else. They were literally one of the top teams in the NBA when it came to pace of play. Now, did that work out for them on the defensive end? No. And the offensive efficiency of that kind of tanked as the year progressed. So can they find ways to open themselves up and get themselves in a rhythm without having to over-rely on something that they'd already seemed to phase out? Spoelstra is also a great coach, recognizing that Giannis is now there. Maybe they do conform back to a system that warrants a lot more activity when it comes to those setup plays. They may have to rely on it. But spacing is a real issue for this Heat team as it appears right now. That's just the truth. Because aside from Norm Powell, who you always know is good for at least 39 to 42% shooting from the floor for you in any given season. Like, you know what you're going to get from Norman Powell, who is now 33 years old, and he quite literally shot 38% from three last year. And that was after a few years in a row where he'd been at around 40, nearing 44% in LA in 2023-24, and a player as well who has also shot 39.6% through his entire career. Like, when it comes to shooters on that team, there aren't much better than Norman Powell amongst the starters. They were projecting Pelle Lawson to be a starter for some reason. That's not going to happen. Andrew Wiggins can also be a hit or miss. And this is another thing that is going to have to work out for them well in order to make this work. Andrew Wiggins, on top of starting alongside Bam Adebayo at the 4, Giannis at the 5 potentially, and then having Norm Powell as a shooting guard, with Davion Mitchell appearing to be their point guard right now, on a unit that is going to struggle with spacing. If this 41.4% clip from Wiggins is something to be accounted for and can effectively carry over into this season, this team is going to be damn near unstoppable. I can assure you that right now. Because at the very least, with a front court of those three, with the strides that Wiggins has taken to not completely blow away teams with performing as an offensive player like he was projected to do coming out of the draft in 2014. He has not come remotely close to that. The key for him was getting in Golden State, serving that role as a third option, occasionally a second option from time to time, but being in that third slot, serving that role, and giving them hard-nosed defense, especially in the playoffs. So, you will need Wiggins to harness something like that again. Wiggins is not in a position where he'll demand the ball a ton. And the Heat cannot really afford that from him right now. Your best bet is to have him get some of the touches, but work better playing off the ball and providing that perimeter defense that was so good for the Warriors team in 2022 that it nearly led to him getting looks as a finals MVP. That's how important he was. And if the goal is to get a championship in Miami, that's how important it is going to need to be for him here. Norm Powell is also a player who can play off the ball, so that won't be much of a problem. Davion Mitchell, on the other hand, I'm glad to see that they kept him. After all, they did sign him to a short-term deal that might not have done a lot, considering how much money needed to be made up with the Giannis deal in the first place. I like that they kept him. Now, the noted struggles from Davion Mitchell outside are not anything to, just gloss over. He genuinely has struggled. At least in the early portion of his career. It was an issue. Like, there were times for the Sacramento team especially, and even when he got there in Toronto for the half season where he was unplayable because of his lack of ability to shoot. while some people still may not trust Davion Mitchell's jumper, it is a promising sign to see that in the half season with the Heat in 2024, as well as the full season last year, he shot an overall percentage of 41%. Again, some people may not buy that. I think that they will live with him showing that, hey, he's at least capable and respectable of doing it. Now, in this offense, he might need higher volume. He might need some higher volume on those shots, especially if they want him to be a bit of a spot-up shooter at times with those other two dominating the ball on a few possessions. That is going to be the absolute next step that Davion Mitchell will have to take in his game. But I do like the idea of having him as a potential pick and roll mate who may also get a high percentage of the touches, with him being the best ball handling guard that they have right now on the roster. You gotta respect that if you are in this system. So Mitchell will certainly get a fair share of touches as well. I'd be interested to see how that works. And also when it comes to defense, with him, it's the best attribute that he has. It was the best attribute that he had coming out of Baylor, being drafted in 2021, and that's the best attribute that he has kept about himself, regardless of whatever else may happen in his career up to this point. Your front court is already set, and for your weak link to be Norman Powell is defensively, that's not the worst thing in the world. At least Norman Powell is a guy who you still understand will give you effort. At all other positions, this Heat team is going to be very hard to pick on at all levels. Mitchell and Wiggins on the perimeter, and then having those guys potentially funnel down the action to either of Adebayo, who had been the defensive anchor for years, now being flanked by the Greek Freak. I mean, the number of things that they can do together, especially on that side of the floor, that is what is going to be the driving force for them to get all the way to a championship. Regardless of what can be said about the offense to this point, it is about that. So, from that standpoint, it's not necessarily about what's fair and honestly, who won the deal. For the Heat to win the deal, they'll want to go all the way. This is the idea of them making this decision and sending away everyone else. Again, there's no question that the death is shot. The draft capital, they fucked off those picks. There's no denying it. As I mentioned, you have Pelle Lawson there, and if he can continue taking those strides as a shooter off the bench, that'll be really good for this Heat team. But I don't know if it's anything too consistent for them to just really hone in on as much as they would like to right now. There's just no possible way for me to say that. One of the surprises for me in this deal, though, was that looking elsewhere at this team, because granted, again, some of these other bench guys, you're just whatever. When it comes to the Simone Fontecchios, the Drew Smiths, the Myron Gardners, the Keyshawn Johnsons, you're not expecting them to do anything. That's just being fair about the situation. I don't know how Nikola Jovic, of all people, survived this deal. Still, to this point, as I was saying earlier, I'm looking at this shit, and I'm seeing that of all wings who had been involved in trade rumors over the past few months for this Heat team, Wiggins was involved in some. Jaime Jaquez Jr. was involved in a lot. Tyler Herro was obviously involved in a lot. And granted, those guys have traditionally performed better. I don't know how the Bucks come away from this deal, getting the likes of all these guys and not having to, for a second, even think twice about picking up Nikola Jovic. My working theory is that maybe the Heat tried to slot him in there, and the Bucks, seeing what he did last season, said, no, we don't want him. I don't know how long Jovic is going to be with this Heat team. Like, if not this deal, there's got to be something in the works with potentially letting him walk. Like, it just was not great for him last season. The Heat have been trying. They've given him reps as a starter, and he underwhelmed. They've given him reps off the bench, trying to make him this 3-and-D player. And it should be reasonable to expect that out of a 6'10", 205-pound man. Yet he shot 26.9% from three-point range as an intended 3-and-D specialist who can't defend, who cannot handle the ball in any way. Yeah, just a big yikes. So again, that core now of a bench with those guys, including Bobby Portis Jr. now, the Heat are probably thinking about adding more, and they should. Like, this is not set. But for what it is, you have to commend them on finally being able to get that guy. Again, it had been a while. They have a storied history of getting it. The Alonzo Mournings that they got from Charlotte, Shaq from LA, LeBron from Cleveland, Chris Bosh from Toronto, and so on over the years and decades past. And now they get their hands on a man in Giannis, who, again, I'm sure, and they even put out some on Instagram before the trade went through, I'm sure he wanted just as much to be with that team forever. But again, with all of that piling up, the distrust that was clearly forming between him and that front office, it was just too far gone. There was no resuscitating or reconciling to be had between those two sides. Now, the Heat as well, if you're going to have this short of a rotation, generally speaking, health has to abide. Health has to abide. The reality of the situation, and something that you may, say in the Bucks' defense to warrant their kind of worry here and make them a little less crazy is that, again, the injuries have been there for Giannis over the years. As a man who is consistently reliant on his athleticism and brute strength to produce on the floor. And of course, when you were in Giannis' position, coming in at 6'10", he's grown to 6'11", but you come from his position being as lanky as he was in 2014, and he goes through that process of picking up that muscle, getting in the gym and putting on that weight over the next few years to turn into that kind of build on the floor. Yeah, I'm going to use all my fucking brute strength and just completely bully you down low. That's the whole fucking point of putting that shit on in the first place. I'm going to use it. I'm going to wield it to my advantage, and there isn't much that you can do outside of building a wall against me. That's the one thing that you can do to try to slow me down. But in most other cases, aside from also potentially forcing me to jack up a high volume of threes, which I'm not going to do, you can't fucking stop me. So yes, that's exactly what I'm going to settle for. And of course, I like that about Giannis Antetokounmpo. That's what makes him one of my favorite players, right? It has affected him physically when you're putting that much of a toll on your body And also, on the glass, fending off offensive players as a defender, altering shots and blocking them. You're getting all that contact in the core areas of your body. And it just got to a point with Giannis where it's like, even with the effort that he has given us on the court night in, night out as a man who wants to win and who does not like losing, it has come with a cost because we don't even have him as available as he needs to be. If this team is going to be all about him, he's got to be out there for us far more than he has been in order for us to get the most we can out of this roster. And when you see, again, all these lower leg injuries, not even just in the 25-26 season, but over the past few years, a damn Achilles ended his season in 2024, multiple hamstring injuries, multiple knee injuries, patella injuries, calf injuries, anything you can think of in the lower leg, he's been dealing with over the past few years. And while he was able to, bypass some of it for some time, enough to, at the very least, still be a consistent 29 and at least 13 player on several different occasions for this Bucks team. At a point, he just stopped being one of those bankable players that could serve to be out there for enough time. It's a crazy thing to think that despite all those injuries I just listed off, he did qualify for the 65-game rule in the previous 2 seasons prior to 2025. But by that point, it all reached a tipping point. You're so fixated on Giannis Antetokounmpo that you have essentially fucked over your roster. You don't have anybody else to rely on your team. It all works around him. It's a heliocentric system. And now he's going to be out, missing 46 of the games this season, as we have been fighting for our basketball lives anyways. So, getting away from just the idea of this front office being stupid, and also Jimmy Haslam, owner also of the Browns, putting himself in yet another vulnerable situation to have to move on from a franchise guy, right? Some of it may be warranted when you take those injuries into account. And if at any one point of time you hear something else, God forbid, about Giannis suffering a major injury, it just really plays back to what the Bucks had been saying the whole time through some of their actions and maybe even non-moves. So that's something that'll be in people's minds in regards to this trade as well. That totally matters. 100%. And it makes the Bucks pickup here even more important. What people are not talking about enough when it comes to their haul here is that you offload the injury that Giannis has been dealing with, and you get guys who have at least consistently played, aside from Kasparas Jakucionis, who's young. This entire deal was player-driven by the youth movement. They wanted that, and they got it. As Tyler Herro himself is 26 and a Wisconsin kid, straight from Milwaukee, which I did not know. But that's just an added bonus to have a hometown man playing for your organization. They'll instantly love him for that reason alone with the team. All these guys in Kel'el Ware, Jaime Jaquez Jr. is a little older, came in as an older rookie, but he's relatively young. And of course, Kasparas Jakucionis got drafted last year. So these are relatively young players. Jaime Jaquez Jr. himself is only 25. Like, you are investing in that, and these guys have been on the floor consistently. Aside from like one injury that I know Tyler Herro was dealing with that kept him out for a substantial amount of games. Other than that, they've been out there available. And despite, especially in the 24-25 season, despite all of the noise going on with Jimmy Butler III, those guys were out there and they were playing. So, in the confines of this, even if on Miami's side, you could question that, hey, there could still be some stuff to hash out between Giannis Antetokounmpo and Pat Riley when it comes to that relationship, right? Even if it gets to that point with the players involved in this deal for Milwaukee, you can still assume that health abiding, they're going to be playing. They're not going to, intentionally take away from the pursuit of what the team is trying to accomplish. They'll be out there, they'll be performing in whatever they have to do. Also, further than the players, you obviously have to highlight the draft capital. The 2031 and 2033 first round picks are pretty damn good, as well as a second rounder and a 2030 pick swap. Even though, as I was hearing about it, you still think like, bruh, Giannis Antetokounmpo only got traded for 3 first-round picks. We only had to send that over for him. Meanwhile, by comparison, inferior players like Mikal Bridges, like Desmond Bane, like Rudy Gobert, got all the draft picks in those deals for a first-round value while producing at a far worse rate. It's just insane to think about. But that is kind of pretty, the Bucks, even if they come away with less overall capital acquired through this deal, they still double up. The number 10 pick in tonight's draft, as well as this 13th overall pick. They can do a lot with that. This draft class is so deep. So fucking deep. Like you would not believe. And we've been saying that for pretty much the last few months. To come away out of a deal like this, having multiple first round picks in your back pocket, and having them that close together to ensure that you can get somebody of high value in that system. It's an excellent play for the Bucks here. And I think that's the thing about this trade that I love the most. I really thought that, hey, if the Heat were really thinking, you could have asked for that number 10 pick at all. Instead, the Bucks made it a non-negotiable deal. So you're just keeping your eyes open on the prize here. Yes, you may take a step back with Giannis Antetokounmpo being gone now. You're accepting that. But you still have a great future to look forward to that you're trying to invest in. And having 2 picks in one of the deepest draft classes ever will likely ensure that. Now, who they end up taking, I'm not necessarily sure. Although some of that will depend on the guys that they still have on their active roster. The fact that Kyle Kuzma survived a deal like this as well is I can understand it because he's not that good. He was fucking playing himself up like he's one of the best trade assets you can get. No, the fuck he isn't. But you have them. You still have guys like AJ Green, Cormac Ryan on a 2-way contract. You have Miles Turner, of course, still being the center for this team. And Ryan Rollins is an interesting story as well. Because with Tyler Herro there now, playing shooting guard primarily, there's an idea of having him play as a number one scoring option. Now, for the Heat, I guess I was right in them needing to choose between building around Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro, and finally, with a move like this, they send off Tyler Herro, making it centered primarily around what Bam Adebayo can do on both sides of the ball. When Herro is getting those kinds of touches, a season like 24-25 is probably a good model of what he could do as a number one player on a team. And I will say that was by force, because again, most of that time, Jimmy Butler III is sitting out. Someone's got to take the role, and it was Tyler Herro. Now, that kind of, went to the wayside a little bit this year. Of course, injuries did not help him. And so you want to make sure that, again, he's healthy, he's on the floor. But with his ability to score at all three levels, for any roster he's on, that does provide great value for the Bucks. I'm just wondering right now, do they trust in Tyler Herro to take that role? Do they trust Ryan Rollins to actually start, a man who tripled his production across the board and who himself will be 25 and another young talent to potentially look towards, and just the next few days he'll turn 25. Will they look to him to do it? Or will they have him continue to come off the bench? Or do they trust Jaime Jaquez Jr., who himself was a sixth man for some time in that Spoelstra system? Now under Taylor Jenkins, that could change a little bit in theory, or they may allow that to stay relatively similar to the game plan. And either way, you've got a lot to think about, but it's a reasonable issue to have. Again, you don't have that large fish looming over your head anymore. All these young players are going to need their respective opportunities to shine, and you're hoping in this position that Taylor Jenkins has enough to get that done. I think he can do it. It might be asking a lot, but who's to say? Jaime Jaquez Jr. as an all-around wing who can pretty much do everything except for shoot the three ball well. That is pretty interesting to look at from my perspective. I don't know if they have enough to say they trust him as a starter right now. He has relatively not been that. In fact, he only appeared in one start and played across all 75 games last season. Now again, all around, he's pretty solid, man. 15.4 points per game, career high. 4.7 assists per game, career high. He can truly do it all, and shot 50.7% from the field. So I wonder if they take much stock into that and kind of make his role a little dynamic as potentially a six-man, maybe even a starting four if they choose to move on from Kyle Kuzma, which maybe they should. Who's to say at this point, right? So those are all things to consider when it comes to those two. And of course, if you have to bring Ryan Rollins off the bench, that just helps your second unit a lot. We mentioned all the depth being taken away from the Heat, but you instantly, with players of this kind specifically, you add that in for relatively low. Honestly, relatively low. And you have more opportunities if they still don't have it in mind right now. It's fresh, 12 hours or so fresh on everyone's mind. They could still actively make a pair of decisions in the draft to pounce on those ideas. Now, I will say I can do this right now from their end to look at the at least a most recent mock draft to now figure out for them, at the very least, what they would initially do at number 10, as well as see, hey, what would a team like the Heat have done at the 13th overall pick, and could that change? Because, again, I've been seeing several about it, and, hey, so much can change. Now, they might have had to do one after the Giannis trade. I mean, it just doesn't get much bigger than that on a potential draft night and shit before we've even had it get underway. So, maybe this could give out a glimpse on what is happening. Let's see. Okay. Initially, the Bucks, yes. So that reigns true now. As of the recording of this video, mock drafts still have the Bucks going after Nate Ahmet initially from Tennessee, who is a 6'10 forward. Now, he himself has had his noted shooting struggles, but is a very strong defender in several ways for that Volunteers team. I don't know, honestly, if he is a player that they should be focusing on, but Ahmet is 19 years old. There is still room for him to grow as a player. And if they take that, with the vacancies that they already have on their back line as it is, potentially having Ahmet fill that role as a power forward, maybe even a small forward, would not be that bad of an idea. The Bucks have taken a completely different direction to build for the future. So, regardless of what they do, whether it be Ahmet or whether it be another player, taking a chance at that isn't a bad idea. And the Heat, in this recent mock draft I'm seeing from USA Today, they had them taking Hennis Steinbeck, a rebounding player from Washington, who is also strong when it comes to interior finishing. Now, if the Bucks were to retain this pick, I don't think that they would be taking Hennis Steinbeck. They would likely take themselves maybe the best remaining guard on the table. And that could be a number of people. That could be LeBaron Fallon Jr. from Alabama. That could be Christian Anderson from Texas Tech. Guys who can, in their own respective ways, create offense. LeBaron Fallon Jr. is a dynamic scoring threat. There's just no question about it. Everybody wants to talk about Darius Acuff Jr. Well, LeBaron Fallon, in that same game where Darius Acuff Jr. went for 49, LeBaron Fallon Jr. was also getting his own buckets. And Alabama won that game, by the way. They won that game. So LeBaron Fallon Jr. is nothing to be played with. And Christian Anderson as well. This man is more of a guy who can set up players in their positions really well. He is an excellent playmaker and also just so happens to do fairly well as a scorer, especially spacing the floor. He shot 41.5% from three-point land and was a massive assist man to JT Toppin before he went down with injury for the year, unfortunately, which hindered Texas Tech's ability to really make a deep run in March Madness as a result. Still, guards like that could potentially be on the board for them to take a look at. And so, hey, you're seeing that, it's like, shit. You have the world in your hands, pretty much, if you're Milwaukee, knowing that you have 2 picks here. And as long as you hit on any one of them, on top of the players that you already have, you're setting yourself up nicely for what's to come. Another key of this trade as well that people may not give much focus to is Kel'el Ware. This man, Kel'el Ware, had gone through some very weird times in Miami, being a player who in ways is built like a true 5. They trusted Bam Adebayo more to fill out that center position, and I guess they trusted his offensive growth a little more than Ware to this point, who just did not get a lot of playing time with how young he was. At least respect as a starter. Kel'el Ware, again, has appeared in all or a large number of games. And he played in 77 last year, got 34 starts, saw his numbers increase overall to a near 11.1 point per game double-double. He had just 9 rebounds per game and shot 53% from the field, while also shooting 39.5% from deep. The biggest thing for Kel'el Ware coming out of the draft was, questioning whether or not he could develop that jumper, because it'd make him a versatile stretch 5 who can also defend relatively well, highlighted as a strength of his coming out of both Oregon and Indiana in college, with the seasons that he spent with those respective schools. Now, I'm not saying that Kel'el Ware is all of a sudden, at 7 foot 230 pounds, he's not going to turn into the next Giannis Antetokounmpo. I don't think that is what they are looking for. But in terms of another big who can provide them with high impact play in that organization, if Ware can give them anything of that sort, this is what truly puts the trade over the top for this Bucks team for me, if they can get that from him. Production is one thing, but being able to provide that on both sides of the ball and having the ability to space the floor truly catapults this team into an entirely different conversation once all these different working parts get into motion. I truly believe that. So that is something to look out for. And Ware is just turned 22 years old as of April 20th. So he is young as shit. Like, there is genuinely time in that system, alongside Taylor Jenkins, a man who himself coached, or was an assistant coach, with Giannis Antetokounmpo at that time. A man who saw the rise defensively of Jaren Jackson Jr. and also the late Brandon Clark, RIP, alongside him. Like, that ability to affect that side of the game, combined with Ware's potential to develop offensively, that's a dangerous combination that no one is ready for, if he can get there. It's unfortunate for Kasparas Jakucionis as well to be involved in. Like, he just got into the league, just got drafted last year, frankly did not play all that much with this Heat team, and I guess the Bucks are hoping that in terms of a point guard, they could also draft one they may trust that he, with a chance to play in some fashion, maybe off the bench, can develop into at least a core piece for them to hang on to for relatively low as well. Just trying to weed out the future and see what they can come away with over that time. It'll take a years-long process to figure out if all of it pans out accordingly for them. But they got the haul that they were looking for. Then you get to the Bucks side of things as well, or the Celtics side of things as well. After going through those two, because obviously those two are the main focus. The Celtics just missed out on the party. Apparently, they offered up Jaylen Brown and 2 first-round picks to the Bucks in order to get the deal done. And, I mean, the simple answer for that going down is that it's not as player-driven. Like, yes, Jaylen Brown himself is searching for a team who can make him a number 1 option. And he'd instantly fill that role in Milwaukee, but it would be the same thing. You have Jaylen Brown, and then what else? What else? You'd be in the same spot. And you'd been hearing different things about the fact that Jaylen Brown could be eligible for a 2-year, $140 million extension with any team that he signs with. The Celtics could do it. If he goes to a different team, they'd be on the chopping block to do it. So you're tying up even more money on a per year salary basis to the lone individual player while still not having enough room already with the Giannis deal on your books, with the waive and stretch deal from Damian Lillard on your books, and with Miles Turner's contract to counteract that. All that is still on your books right now. You're not going to have room to do much of anything. The 2 first-round picks are also reasonable, but I don't think any one of them came from this draft. And even then, I don't think the one that might have came from this draft would be valuable enough to the Bucks. It would not be a lottery pick because the Celtics were good enough to play themselves out of a draft lottery spot this year. Wouldn't have been valuable enough. It does make things kind of awkward when you hear about the different conversations with Jaylen Brown. It makes things incredibly weird. But for now, they had to hold firm on that. And, I credit the Bucks for staying true to their beliefs, right? They wanted the younger players, and they knew that the Celtics could not offer way more. In fact, there had been a report, essentially, that the Bucks were essentially looking heavily into getting Hugo Gonzalez, another player who had gotten drafted for another player who the Celtics have recently drafted. Gonzalez is an excellent defender already. With what I have been saying about him, like you'd think that he is a veteran established. No, this is a rookie doing some of the things defensively that he had last season. It was fucking insane. So you're already getting that, and the Bucks, in terms of young players, in terms of young assets, they were highlighting him as one who could potentially step in right away and make an instant impact if the Celtics were to give him up. It goes that the Celtics would not allow it to happen, and as a result, the deal could not go through. So they were essentially left with nothing. A lot of crazy people are going to say, hey, there's no way that Hugo Gonzalez is that valuable, right? You could be very wrong in time. You could be very wrong. But hey, man, nonetheless, just a crazy deal overall. So crazy that it just had to highlight this video. In a perfect world, it could be the full video. That's how much came out of this immediately. That's how much context goes into this. Because this had been raging on for a while, and finally we weren't pump faked, man. There have been so many of those throughout this entire process. Finally came through. What a career it was for Giannis Antetokounmpo in Milwaukee. Literally became one of the best players in the world from a very poor upbringing in Greece. Homeless for a little bit. All that. And he played himself out of that. He literally built himself up to be a man in real time. And it paid off for him in several different ways, as he now leaves with this laundry list of accomplishments and the support of essentially an entire generation plus of Greek Nigerian players, as well as just general fans in the Milwaukee area. Like, yes, the business side of things can definitely take over the overall sentiment. Make no mistake about it. I don't think that you'll hear about many Bucks fans harboring any ill will towards Giannis Antetokounmpo. Whenever he's able to return to that city, potentially for a game, even he said there was a report from Crispy Haynes that he didn't even want to leave the city particularly. He just wanted to leave the Bucks. So there's a very real case where his family may still be residing there. Like, they're genuinely going to be loved. It's just about getting this situation resolved. And finally, it came to a conclusion in the overnight hours, in between yesterday and today. There was a lot more that happened. And I guess, this trade is the main focus. So I'll be very brief when talking about these other ones, including one that also just broke recently as I was recording. I'll be very brief about that. Also, World Cup is still going on as well. Ronaldo actually scored while I was recording, so I want to try to get to that and see what's happening. He's finally been heard from. And Trae Young as well, in the context of starting this other stuff out, was also pretty loud yesterday. He had already declined his player option, and in doing that, he could either enter the market or the team in question could have a chance to sign him to a long-term contract extension. The Wizards did exactly that, signing Trae Young to a 4-year, $212 million contract extension with a player option in the 4th year. So essentially what he just did, they will not have another conversation like that for the next few years. And it's just crazy. I mean, as I was saying about it, Trae Young essentially just did the fucking Paul George thing. Paul George got the exact same deal for a team in Philadelphia that had championship aspirations, that hasn't come remotely close to that, and it is serving as an overpay as we speak. Trae Young, a player who had only appeared in 15 games this last season, 15 games, is getting himself that kind of deal. This was just an absolute desperation move on both sides. Trae Young, we understood how low the value was. He genuinely may not have had another avenue on teams to choose. He might not have had another place to go. That's just the brutal reality of the situation. The Wizards, as well, they're still being a team regarded in purgatory and not nearly good enough to win a championship right now. They are clinging onto any bit of hope that they can gain. Apparently, Anthony Davis is looking for an out. I'm sure they'll try to retain him as best as they can, even though it's crazy for him to be looking for a long-term extension right now as well. But I digress. That is just fucking crazy to think about. I guess when both of those two are healthy, it could paint this Wizards team in completely different picture here. And they might be, to perform well enough to at least contend for a play-in spot. There's no guarantee there. But if they are both healthy, I guess that is something that is possible. And maybe that's what the Wizards are banking on with a deal like this. But even then, apparently they said that they would still take a guy like Darren Peterson at 1. And it did not affect them trying to get the best player available with that pick. Like, again, you do all that and you'd still get a guard. Like, oh my gosh. Even with what I said about Trae Johnson III, too. So that might get put on the back burner a little bit. We'll probably still have him, like, come off the bench from time to time, I guess. Having to now satisfy working around that system, playing off the ball. Something that, again, at Texas, Trae Johnson III didn't necessarily have to do, even as a freshman. But you have to adapt in a game like this. So Trae Young gets paid. It's crazy to see him get that kind of deal. It's wild. There's no way to overturn it now. The Knicks would sign Mohamed Diawara to a multi-year deal worth over $10 million, and then disaster would strike. I mean, like, when you don't want to make a rash decision on trades so early, but there are some that, again, will obviously look like a win or a loss for a given team when you look at it in an instant. And there might not be a greater example of this in the short amount of trades that have just taken place prior to the NBA draft. Despite all of what I just went through with the Giannis deal, there might not be one that fits into that category of just immediate bad beats more than having Minnesota trade Julius Randle in the 28th overall pick to Brooklyn in exchange for the number 33 pick. In a 3-team deal, the Nets also dealt Nicolas Claxton to the Bulls per Shams Charania. And this happened yesterday before the Giannis deal even broke at midnight. This happened before all of that. Like, this is just so nasty. This is, like, literally, you talk about bad fits, and here we will have Julius Randle, a noted playoff dropper, an inefficient ball handler, and a turnover machine at the forward position, especially when he tries to initiate offense. We have that pairing up with a man in Michael Porter Jr. who literally will chuck up shots like there is no tomorrow. So we're already going to have the possession end as soon as Michael Porter Jr. gets the ball. And we'll also have our fair blend of Julius Randle trying to dribble the ball up the fucking court, spinning into a double team, getting blitzed immediately, and losing the ball, trying to pass it in the corner to Jaeger Joman. Like, this is the type of basketball that will set the game back for a good 10 years. With those two alone, what is it with these New York teams trying to create these weird dynamic duos? It was the Giants getting Falele and Evan Neal, and now you're doing the same fucking thing in Brooklyn, the lesser of the boroughs in New York. It's crazy. Randle, after the Knicks win a championship, gets sent back to this fucking state just to play for Brooklyn. I can tell you what, and don't give me the shit about this being a play for the Nets to get in playoff contention. Maybe it does make them relevant because they believe that they're getting themselves a star caliber player. Do not be fooled by the numbers. Julius Randle is nobody's savior. He's not coming to save you. Like, he's literally going to make this team stay right way they are already at and have been at for years. He is not going to move the needle for this team and all of a sudden turn them into a playoff contender. He's never been that. So he won't have to worry about being the focal point of an offense in the postseason. And that's always where he starts to shit the fucking bed. So, you're not going to have to worry about that there. This is just going to be an absolute disaster class of a pairing with those two. In terms of the pick here, with what Minnesota likely could have done, it is interesting because you offload Julius Randle, so some of that money's gone now off your books. And I'd honestly expect them to get rid of Rudy Gobert too. I just don't see a world in which they're going to keep him. The Timberwolves were expected to draft Jack Kyle with the 28th overall pick. Not a person that I'm as familiar with. Leave it up to the Nets to draft somebody like that. They have a lot of first-round picks as it is, and they're already mocked at number 6 to take Michael Brown Jr. out of Louisville, which is actually pretty good. For just trying to get some talent on that roster. Trying as best as you can to. That might not be the worst thing in the world. But Julius Randle, on the other hand, oh dear. What the do you know how bad you have to be to get demoted from a team that prior to this season made back-to-back appearances in the Western Conference Finals and then sent over to fucking Brooklyn. In this day and age? In this climate? The fucking Nets? Are we being serious, Julius Randle? This is all you're doing because you still cannot perform in the playoffs. That series against the Spurs was the last straw at this point. The last straw. At every pivotal moment, he just disappears. The Western Conference Finals against the Mavericks, nowhere to be found. Against the Thunder, nowhere to be found outside of one fluky-ass game. And even then, still didn't come to matter all that much. They got gentlemen swept in 5 games. And then you get the same result, the same story against San Antonio. Terrible efficiency, high turnover rate. When he's supposed to be counted on as at least a co-star. Meanwhile, you're getting outplayed by fucking Jaden McDaniels. And granted, if Jaden McDaniels was kind of I don't know, he answered it in such a wild way when he was told that Julius Randle got traded. I'm I can't blame any kind of emotions that Jaden McDaniels might have. He was probably just there, just working out with him, just talking with him. That might be true. But when it comes to the basketball court, now McDaniels gets an opportunity to take away more offensive reps with Randle being gone. And McDaniels being the much better defender than Randle ever will be at this point. So, just good fucking luck to the 2 Nets fans out there and any that haven't become bandwagons to the Knicks after the championship win. It is going to continue being a tough season for you. And then some. Sure, it'll bring in some viewers every now and then, but it's not anything that's going to inspire much of a winning culture. You're literally just going to get a sword fighting contest between those two trying their best to hog the ball and compete to see who will take the dumber shot on a possession-by-possession basis. I got my odds on Michael Porter Jr. still finding a way to do it because the nigga, once he touches the ball, he will not give it up. How the fuck do you expect Julius Randle to play alongside that? And then, even in cases where Julius Randle might be the primary ball handler, bro, the second he sees a crowd, he's going to shrivel up like a fucking raisin. He's not going to be able to get a pass away to the direction of Michael Porter Jr. or other shooters on that team in the first place. Just an abject disaster of a trade. Yeah, I just wanted to be brief on it, but like, it's just such a shitty deal to have him on this roster. It's like, okay, bro, like, what the fuck? But no, Nicolas Claxton going to the Bulls is seriously a great asset. Seriously. And even me right now saying all that is just not doing it the justice that it deserves. When it comes to what the Bulls need in that system, and, you know, you just had such a weird situation with offensive-minded big men for such a long time. Obviously, Nikola Vucevic was there, but was not really a dominant threat down low or on the defensive end to warrant his play. Plus, you consider how old he was while still being a part of that roster. Now that you have Nicolas Claxton there, you have a man who is going to bring forth a presence of youth in that front court for the first time in some years, honestly. Claxton himself currently is, let me see. Yeah, he is 27 years old right now, so a fairly young player, right in the middle of his prime, and he is regarded as a player who is one of the better defenders that the Nets had to offer. That bodes very well for the Bulls. He'd been consistently available over the past 4 seasons, playing in greater than 69 games since 2022-2023. You want availability. It's the best ability, and he's got it more often than not over the past few years. While in this last season averaging 11.7 points per game along with 6.9 assists, a career high 3.7 rebounds, and also 57.1% shooting from the field. You will not get a man who is versatile. He cannot shoot. He cannot make his free throws. And playmaking, and again, he did take strides there. I still don't think that you would put that much faith in Nicolas Claxton to do that job. But as a potential lob threat, as a physical rebounder, as a potential defensive ace, trying to hold up that back line, for one of the first times in Nicolas Claxton's career, he'll be surrounded by a team that does actually have some genuine promise on their roster. And he'll have a true reason motivating him to finally be the defensive anchor that other people may have expected him to be for some time. Again, there might have been shades of that in Brooklyn, but it was never going to pay off with the talent gap between them and the rest of the league. As mediocre as the Bulls have been, they themselves have a lot more to offer, quite frankly. So, getting him in the prime of his career, putting together that kind of contribution right now, and standing at 6'11", near 7 foot, like, that does, hey, that has got to be a relieving feeling for the Bulls. The only thing they may ask him to do, is to bulk up a little bit. I mean, I guess I've never heard him be called either of the Slim Reaper or the Alchemist as nicknames. I'd never heard that. But with him standing at 215 pounds, if he's going to be asked to be a defensive anchor, potentially as a rim-running block specialist, okay, there will still be possessions where he'll have to be guarding up in the post. You don't want to keep getting shoved around and need to rely on help defense from other defenders to do your job. So that might be something they, rap to him about as like, hey, okay, we're going to need you to add a little more weight to you. Other than that, he's probably good. So yeah, that I do like the Bulls doing that. I'll definitely slander the fucking Julius Randle element, but Nick Claxton, they freed him. They freed him finally. They freed him from the jaws of continuous, everlasting defeat. So I love to see that. The deal to shed Julius Randle's contract off did end up freeing up some money for the Timberwolves immediately, as they would then sign Ayo Dosunmu to a 5-year, $112 million contract extension that he instantly came in after the trade deadline and earned. There's just no question. The three-point shooting touch was still there. He was still able to provide them with jack of all trades play on his end as both a defender and occasionally a scorer who could take the pressure off of Anthony Edwards, namely in the playoff game where he had 45 points off the bench. That game alone might have instantly jogged their brains to then make this decision. Because you're not just going to see that from a man that you just acquired and not consider at least giving him an extension. Now, granted, it might look crazy on paper, but at the same time, again, we are in the day and age where the cap is increasing in the market, even for, role players or adjacent role players is hiking up. This is a deal that's worth pretty much about $22.4 million per year. That's not as expensive. That's not as expensive as you would think. Genuinely. I think it's worth it for a player of that kind. And, to have him now on a roster that is looking to at least go on the path to a championship, that would be the next step for this Timberwolves team. They've been in contention for this long, and they've been to the Western Conference Finals that many times in a row. They want to get over the hump. Addition by subtraction is letting Randle go. They may also let go Badwalk. And they're trying to retain guys who they believe can truly build towards that for them. Dosunmu happens to be one of those characters. And then the Blazers as well, we've got a head coaching hire for them. Recently, per multiple reports, they signed Micah Nori, the assistant head coach from the Timberwolves, tying it all together. They signed him as their new head coach. Or hired him as their new head coach, sorry. I mean, as I was saying, is he a promising coaching figure? Yes. For years now, there have been reports cycling around Micah Nori being a coaching figure who could potentially hear his own name called in the hiring cycle over the next few years. That was said. Like, the fact that from time to time, especially in cases where Chris Finch might have gotten, hurt, namely in a playoff series where he literally got injured, you have Micah Nori being asked to step in and take over his job. Like, that already showcases a lot of trust, clearly, that the Timberwolves, at least, had in Nori to pretty much elevate himself whenever they saw fit. And so you're carrying that over now for another team looking to get the most out of their young players. It works a little bit because Micah Nori himself, literally working alongside Chris Finch, has done nothing over the past few years but spend time with young player after young player after young player. At the very least, attempting to see how much they can get out of them. Now, again, it hadn't always worked out. Rob Dillingham. It hadn't always worked out. But when it has, amongst the Anthony Edwardses, amongst the Jaden McDanielses, amongst the Terrence Shannon Juniors of the world, it's been very special for this Timberwolves team. So the Blazers are looking for Nori to have the same kind of impact there. I guess from that same perspective, oh my gosh. Let's see this. Oh, he just scored again. But yeah, let me lock in. So you have that going down. Yep. The Blazers still could have, yes, I guess in this case, they don't have to really expend a huge contract over to Micah Nori. So I guess from that perspective, they get a reasonable coaching figure, and they don't even have to pay him that much, if anything at all, right now. Was it really worth letting Splitter walk for that? I'm still not all that sure. You can't harp over it now. The deal just got done. They just made it happen. So it literally is what it is. It doesn't do them much good to keep crying over it at this time. But it's just like, man, if you're going to go out there and you're going to pick up Micah Nori with ease, I mean, damn, wouldn't you have just been better off retaining the head coach that you already been building this system with? And it might not be sweat for Micah Nori, who will get his first nod as a head coach. He also, not to take anything away from the entire scope of the situation, he himself might have real intrigue in taking over this team. Especially being able to work with your Scoot Hendersons, your Denny Avdias. There could be real intrigue for him to work with this roster. So that is not something that I'm dismissing in this equation at all. But you're asking Micah Nori to adjust in real time from working with a team that was in championship contention to now deal with a team that is merely trying to keep themselves in the playoff conversation. Now, we saw it before again. Splitter literally lifted them from a rebuilding team to a playoff contender. They've still got a ways to go before they can become one of the better teams in the Western Conference. Maybe they never do. Right? Those are the kinds of things that you just have to keep in the back of your mind and try to at least, work around in order to effectively build up this roster. So, those are just a few thoughts to consider there. And I guess, lastly, just to see right now, is there anything else? Anything else before this draft? Oh, not related. Is there anything else that can work to the context of the NBA right now prior to this draft tonight? Because this would be the time. This would be the time. Nope. It is still just the Micah Nori thing as the last piece of news today. So yeah, most of this came from a variety of sources, including Shams Charania, and pretty much all this happened in just the span of quite literally, like, you think about it, shit, pretty much 20 hours. 20 hours. All the way from the Trae Young contract extension to the Giannis deal that tipped everything off here. It's just insane how that will move. That is how we know that, yes, the NBA season just recently ended, but man, we are already getting so deep into the NBA offseason. It is crazy right now. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.